Spurs have been linked in the last month alone with well over 25 players. Ange Postecoglou saying in his press conference just today that he wouldn't have time for anything else if he was going to have a look at all of those players. So we know that a lot of it will just be nonsense at this sort of time of year, approaching a window. There's a lot of talk from agents trying to push through moves for players. I'm going to be very careful when talking about some of these players. I'm going to firstly go through players that we have been rumoured to be linked with and a little bit of background on some of those, including whether I would take them or not. And then I'll talk about some of the players that we do have that may leave the club or their futures might be in question, as well as players I think we should be targeting. But let's start with goalkeepers. Now, of course, Fraser Forster has been stepping in for the injured Vicario, doing a pretty good job. But I think it's widely accepted that Spurs are looking for a goalkeeper or are in the market or at least open to a goalkeeper. So there's been three main names linked with the club. One being James Trafford from Burnley, 22 years old. He's got pretty good stats when it comes to shot stopping. He's young, he's English, he kind of fits those bills. And I think he would personally be good in terms of providing competition for Vicario. I think probably the natural progression next season would be Forster becoming third choice. I don't think we're going to get a goalkeeper in this January, and I think the club will probably also monitor the progress of Josh Keeley, who has been doing a fantastic job at Leyton Orient as well. But that's one that's been linked, as well as Anthony Patterson, the Sunderland goalkeeper. Again, he's pretty highly rated. He's slightly older, 24 years old, but Sunderland fans seem to be pretty happy with him. He's another one that would fit the bill in terms of being English. I think this is a sort of recurring theme a little bit. But I must say, the times I've seen him, he looks pretty good. But then again, the Premier League is a different beast. And then a bit of a left field goalkeeper that's been only recently linked with us is John Victor, the 28-year-old Botafogo goalkeeper. He's been described as a man mountain, 6'5", and he played a massive role in Botafogo's Serie A success in Brazil, as well as winning the Copa Libertadores as well, which is no mean feat. So there's some, he's certainly a winner, if anything else. Not quite broken into the Brazil team yet, but with Alisson and Ederson, I think that's going to be pretty difficult. Then in terms of defenders, one man that's been linked with us recently, Omar Alderete, the Paraguayan international at Getafe. So it's believed he's got a 13 million, just over 13 million pound release clause. He's a centre-back that can also play left-back. Now, I had a look at the stats comparing him to our centre-backs, and he's pretty good for those that do like the stats. He's very, very high up in terms of take-ons, progressive passing, kind of moving forward. His overall defensive stats are not the best. But at 27 years old and at that price tag, he seems to have the hallmarks that would suit Ange Ball. And there are rumours that Ange Postecoglou likes him. Whether they're true, I have no idea. He's a player, I must admit, I've never heard of until I saw these links. So God knows how he would do if he did come to the club. But there are a few players that I certainly have seen a lot more of. One being David Hansko, the 27-year-old Feyenoord left centre-back who can also play at left-back. That's another recurring theme. We seem to be linked with centre-backs who can also do a job. Now, he's a bit of a goal threat. I mean, he scored several goals already over the last few years, including that the equaliser against Manchester City in the Champions League. Again, versatile, good on the ball, has a bit of experience. He won the league under Arne Slot. It was fantastic for him in that Feyenoord side. He's one that I would personally love to see at Spurs, as I think he it's a real upgrade on Ben Davis. Again, it's not to criticise Ben Davis. I just think long term, we need to be looking to have four players that can really compete and someone that can give Van de Ven a run for his money. And as well as, we know he's got these hamstring injuries, someone that can really step in. So Hansko, I think, would be a great option. It's been talked about around about £35 million, which wouldn't be out of Spurs' price range. I suppose for a player like Hansko, who is playing in the Champions League, I think where we are in Europe, whether we're in the Champions League or not, might define whether we can get a player like that. He's also been linked with other clubs like Liverpool for obvious reasons. Another one, Ilya Zabani, the 22-year-old Bournemouth centre-back, Ukraine international. Now, for those that like the stats, they don't read particularly well, but I think he's the perfect example of why you watch the game with your eyes and not with stats. Every time I've seen him, I'm very impressed. He seems to be sort of ever improving, really comfortable on the ball. Of course, with Andoni Iraola at Bournemouth, he's used to playing out from the back, which is good to see, and great for Ange ball. And he's pretty dominant in the air as well. I think that's something we really have lacked, is that centre-back that really can command. I think Dragusin certainly has given us a little bit more, but I think that's something that we can say is perhaps a criticism of all of our centre-backs, is they're not quite as dominant in the air as we'd like to see. Zabani certainly is. So he's one to watch, I think. Again, with all of these Premier League players that we're linked with, price tag is always going to be slightly difficult. There's always, we know what it's like buying from a Premier League club, whereas you might find an alternative for cheaper, like Alderete. Zabani, at his age and with his kind of constant improving for Bournemouth, he's one that I'd imagine would be quite expensive. He's been quite heavily linked with Chelsea amongst other clubs as well. Another one that's slightly odd, Pascal Struijk, the Leeds captain, has been linked with us recently, left-sided player. He's been impressive for Leeds. And when I've seen him, he's looked pretty sturdy. But at the same time, even today, there's been, reports about Leeds saying, are they too nice? I'm not sure that this one makes a lot of sense. Certainly not of a quality where I think, is he better than Ben Davies? I don't think he is. So personally, not one I would take. And just today, we've been linked with Milan Skriniar again. Of course, we were so heavily linked with Milan Skriniar over the years when he was at Inter Milan, proven winner. He was described by Antonio Conte as monstrous. He's now 29. He's a winner. Of course, he's having a frustrating time at PSG. He's not playing an awful lot. He's not first choice. But I think he's a pretty classy defender. Both myself and my dad follow Inter very closely. My dad grew up watching Inter all the time in Italy. So always kept an eye on them. And he was an amazing part of that Inter title winning side under Conte. And there's been talk about £15 million price tag. I think in so many ways he would make sense. But he doesn't perhaps fit that bill in terms of being that diverse left-sided centre-back. But what he does bring is a wealth of experience, a big personality and a lot of quality. And at £15 million, if the price tag is to be believed, I think that's a no-brainer. But competition with some Turkish clubs, I think Galatasaray are quite interested in him. Moving on to the midfielders, where else to start but Johnny Cardoso, the Betis and USA international, 23 years old, very defensive-minded. And, of course, Spurs have a clause to buy him for £21 million, part of the agreement in our sale of Giovanni Lo Celso. Everyone that I know that watches La Liga, I don't really watch an awful lot of La Liga, says that he's a particularly impressive player. And he's one to watch. Really, really dominant in the air, on the ball. He's not really a progressive passer. Certainly more fits the bill of that out-and-out six. So with that deal that we do have for only £21 million in his age, I think this is one to watch. Not in January, because he's come out recently and said that he has no interest in moving in January. He'll wait until the end of the season. But he's one that I think we absolutely could sign in the summer. I'm not entirely able, I can't say whether he's top quality or not because I've not watched enough of him, but he's certainly one I'm going to keep my eye on. To a couple of players that I have seen a lot more of, Davide Fratesi, the Inter centre mid, 25 years old, box to box, good on the ball. I think this one's probably quite unlikely because First of all, I think you do see Italians rarely go to the Premier League or rarely leave Italy full stop. And for a lot of reasons, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. I think he wouldn't cost an awful lot of money, but I don't know if Inter have to sell. But also, I think what we all want to see in a centre mid is someone that is a dominant six. And I'm not sure that Fratesi quite fits the bill. To me, he just seems a little bit too similar to some of our other midfielders, Papsar, Bissouma, perhaps. You know, I'm a big fan of Fratesi. I think he's a very talented player, both for Inter and for Italy, but it's not one that I can see happening. But whether Paratici is still involved in some capacity, which I believe he is, you can never rule out a player from Serie A. And to another player from Serie A, one I think is highly unlikely now, but a player we were very heavily linked with in the summer, that's Atalanta's Ederson. Truly outstanding footballer. I watched the Atalanta Real Madrid game and he was, for me, the best player on the pitch. Incredibly good, box to box. He's great on the eye. Man United and Juventus have also been linked with him recently. And the price tag that's being talked about, rumoured to be around 42 to 50 million pounds. So again, not impossible, but not one that I can see Spurs doing in January at all. And I certainly think he will be a player playing Champions League football next season, regardless of whether it's for Atalanta or elsewhere. And I think with Atalanta in the title race in Serie A, I don't see him going anywhere at the minute. They've also started well in the Champions League. So you can effectively rule that one out straight away. A couple of other ones, slightly odd. Andreas Pereira from Fulham is one that's been linked with us. I think this is certainly more of a rumour. 28 years old. I think we've all seen plenty of him at Manchester United and at Fulham. Pretty tidy player, Premier League experience. He scored, of course, at Anfield at the weekend. I like him, but again, does he offer a lot more than our current midfielders? I don't think so. So I'm not entirely sure where this makes sense. Again, it's not a player that I'm opposed to per se, but not one that I would prioritise in any way, shape or form. Andy Diouf, the 21-year-old Lens midfielder. He's pretty tall, pretty strong. I must admit, this was a YouTube jobby for me today. He appears to be very strong, left-footed. Reminded me of Dembele, but then again, when you watch a YouTube compilation, I think a lot of players look like Moussa Dembele, so I'll take it with a pinch of salt. But one thing that certainly did strike me was how dominant he was, how big he was, and how good he was shooting from distance. I was saying, and I have said on the podcast many times, how I would have loved Amadou Onana, and he has a lot of similar traits to Amadou Onana. And Lens are no slouches in French football either. And at that age, maybe it's one to keep an eye on because Spurs seem to keep going for young players. So certainly I think he could play that 6 role. And he's one that I would probably keep an eye out on, whether it happens in January or beyond. He's a player that I wouldn't be surprised if he continues to be linked with the club if he carries on playing the way he is. Another one, Angel Gomez, again, former Manchester United, completely reinventing himself at Lille. They've been magnificent in Europe this season. And of course, breaking into the England side. The one thing that worries me is his size. He's obviously very small, but he's incredibly nimble. I think the ball seems to stick to him like glue, and he seems to keep things ticking in that midfield. I certainly think that there could always be room for a player like Angel Gomez in any squad, especially with that sort of element of reinventing himself, the chance to bring him back to the Premier League and prove a point. I think there'll be other clubs certainly interested with him. But from a selfish perspective, I'd love to see Spurs have more England internationals. I think all of you guys probably agree as well. So he's one that I would definitely like to see at the club. Whether it's, there's any truth into it, who knows at this point. But he's a player that I certainly suspect will be linked with the Premier League for some time. And certainly, if not in January, into the summer as well. But just given where Lille are in the Champions League at the minute, I don't think he'll be going anywhere. And nor does he need to right now at 24 years old. The last midfielder I'm going to talk about is Rio Hatate, the Celtic player, of course, scoring in the Scottish Cup I don't know what Scottish Cup it was. There's so bloody many of them. But scored one of the penalties in the shootout against Rangers. Of course, he's played with Ange Postecoglou. He's won lots of trophies. I know people will automatically criticise and dismiss the trophies that he is winning because he's at Celtic. However, for a player to have played with Ange, for Ange to know and trust that player, he's got an immense work rate. Every time I've watched him, I've been impressed with him. And he does like a goal or two as well. He's one that I could certainly see happening. And I think if a club like Spurs go in with a fairly reasonable, transfer fee, I think Celtic would be hard stop to keep him. Then, of course, Marcus Rashford. Let's go to the forwards. Let's get this one straight out the way. I think it's impossible with his enormous wages, all of his off-field troubles. I mean, he's from crashing his car to going out on nights out when he shouldn't have been. It's been really sad, actually, to see Marcus Rashford not quite hit the heights that we all thought he would earlier in his career. But let's not dismiss what he has done this season. 7 goals and 3 assists. He's only 27 years old, but I think where he does fit the bill in many ways, just those wages, I don't think I can see that happening. And also, Manchester United, are they really going to sell to Spurs? I don't think so. So I think that's one that we can probably categorize as just a classic, rumor that we get linked with these types of players. Every so often when the form is bad. We need a long-term Son successor. So I don't think he's the answer. Now, someone who I think could be the answer is Omar Marmoush, the Frankfurt forward. 18 goals and 12 assists in just 23 appearances this season. He is seen very much as the Prince of Egypt to Mo Salah's king, very much the heir to the throne in Egyptian football. And he is, from what I've seen of him, at least, incredibly talented, 2-footed, quick, great finisher, incredibly versatile. I think we could definitely play him off the left as well. Will he cost a lot? Probably, because of the form he's in. And I think actually probably the biggest task of getting a player like Omar Marmoush would actually be the fact that there is so much competition for a player like that may well drive the transfer fee up. I'm sure there'll be the likes of Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Liverpool, other clubs interested. Arsenal, I think, have also been linked with him. He's playing Europa League football for Frankfurt, and he's just a magnificent player on the eye. So one that I definitely think could thrive in the Premier League, and one that I would love to see at the club. Matheus Cunha from Wolves, of course, Prem proven, 8 goals, 3 assists, just 25 years old, same as Marmoush. Absolutely electric at times, but also other times not so much. I think it's quite hard to judge him this season with how bad Wolves have been. But one thing you can say about Wolves is he has been the standout for them. Of course, in a bit of trouble recently for misconduct after the Ipswich game. The only thing I would say on Matheus Cunha, don't think it's possible in January, nor would I expect Wolves in a relegation battle to sell him. I think regardless of whether they stay up or not, he will not be a Wolves player next season. I just think that it's one of those players that I can't see the price tag being anything less than that of similar to Richarlison, around the sort of £60 million mark. You just see how these transfers go. Is he the answer to replace Son? Potentially. He's been good off that left. Are there players I would prefer to him? Probably. But again, if Cunha comes to the club, he's not one that I would be disappointed with at all. And the last one that keeps getting linked with Spurs window after window, it's been relentless. I think it's been the same for about 3 years now, is Jonathan David, also at Lille. 17 goals, 4 assists this season, including 6 goals and 3 assists in the Champions League, including the qualifiers. I think it's 4 goals in the Champions League proper. I mean, he's rapid. He keeps improving year on year. He looks set to improve his goals tally on last season and could be available for free in the summer. So with that being in mind, that's one that maybe could happen in January, because a lot of clubs will want to try and get ahead and try and agree either a pre-contract or just get him, and Lille might want to cash in. But I think in the form that he's in, I think Lille will possibly take the hit. Jonathan David, again, Is he better than Dom Solanke? Well, it's pretty hard to tell. He's not played in the Premier League before, but I certainly think they're a similar level. I think they would challenge one another, and he is a different type of striker, absolutely rapid. So I certainly think that would give us a bit of diversity, a bit of options in the forward line. So Jonathan David is one that just keeps getting linked. Will he be the Leandro Damião of recent times? Potentially. We'll have to wait and see. But with 17 goals already this season, I certainly don't think that Spurs will be top of the list in terms of his preference to move. I'm sure he might see himself going somewhere slightly higher than Spurs, but he continues to be linked nonetheless. In terms of Spurs players, Richarlison, rumoured interest from Fluminense. I think their president came out recently and said that they're interested. Saudi interest remains. There seems to be just constant rumours about Saudi Arabian interest with him. I just wonder if Turkey might become a player in all of this, because Turkey seem to be doing a lot more in the transfer window. I think it's going to really depend on what happens with his injury. I don't think the club would have discussions with him about his future until he's fit. It seems a bit odd that they would do that. And I think also Spurs, to be honest, need to get him fit and firing before the end of the season if they're going to recoup any sort of fee for him. Because at the minute, it's not looking good. So it's one of those that hopefully he gets fit. I think all of us would like to see the end of Richarlison at Spurs just because of the constant injuries. But I think that's one that is more likely to happen in the summer. Hopefully he can get back and fit. He can play a big role until the end of the season, and then we can get some sort of good fee for him. I think it's highly unlikely that he's going to move in January, especially when he's not fit. Another one to look at is Tyrese Hall. Hardly featured. He hardly been in the squads, in fact, for Spurs, even though he was one of those real shining lights of the under-23s last year, and everyone sort of thought that he would get a chance this year. I think that's one that would probably get a loan move away. And actually, I see a Rangers fan commenting just now, maybe somewhere like that would be a perfect loan move for a player like Tyrese Hall. I'd love to see him get some minutes away. Timo Werner, we all want to see the back of him. I think that's fair to say. But what I've been reading and everything that I'm seeing is that Leipzig will have the final say over his future. They have to agree to a deal to terminate his loan early, which, given how poorly he's been playing, it just seems frankly impossible. To me, I guess Ange's public criticism of him, it just felt like one last rallying cry to get something out of him. I think we can all see that there is something in him, but he just does not seem to be able to get it out of him. I mean, everyone wanted Timo Werner when he was banging them in for Leipzig the first time around. But I just don't know what has gone wrong sort of mentally for him to be kind of in this position. So again, as frustrating as it is, I think we're going to be stuck with him until the end of the season. I would be shocked if Spurs do buy him permanently or loan him again after this season. And another player I think to watch out for is Yves Bissouma. I don't think again we're gonna get many players out, but Yves Bissouma is one that I think a lot of people are growing frustrated with. I think that Ange's reaction to his woeful tackle against Chelsea kind of summed it up. And when I watch Yves Bissouma, I kind of think, what do you actually offer us as a football club? And he doesn't offer a great amount. Okay, he's quite good at shooting from the edge of the box, but it's discipline. I mean, he was just suspended then from the Chelsea game after the Chelsea game for Southampton. He is a player that increasingly seems to be a liability, and I think he's one that we certainly should be cashing in on when we can. And then, of course, finally, Sergio Reguilón, no future at the club. That's very obvious. We're not going to extend his contract. He's not going to want to extend. He'll be a free agent in the summer. If we don't agree a deal for him now, I think Spurs' preference would probably be to try and take a hit and accept a little bit of money for him in January. If not, we'll lose him on a free. He's one that I would say with 99% certainty leaves in the summer. And just finally, a word on Ashley Phillips. Now, with all of the sort of defensive troubles that we've had and the injuries, it's been asked the question of, will we go and bring him back to the club? I've seen conflicting reports, but the latest that I've read is that we do have a recall clause on his contract, but he's only played 11 games at Stoke and he's certainly not pulled up trees. So I think, to be honest, for a player that young, I think we should keep him where he is and allow him to continue his development. I'm not sure what else we're gonna gain by getting him back. I'd much rather see us go out and get a centre-back. But on to players that I actually like and think we should be targeting at the minute. I think it's clear we need a left-sided player. I really like Leif Davis at Ipswich. 1 goal, 2 assists since coming up to the Premier League. He's got a wicked left foot. At 24 years old as well, I think he'd fit the bill. Good competition for Udogie, but he is Newcastle mad. He's from Newcastle fan. If Newcastle have a sniff, I think there's only one place he's going, but I certainly like him nonetheless. Another one, Anthony Robinson, would cost probably quite a lot, 27 years old. Of course, getting 2 assists at Anfield. He's rapid, he's Prem proven. I actually think there's a case to say, in fact, a very strong case to say he's better than Udogie. And is that what we need to do? I think actually there's certainly an argument to say that I think we could improve on Udogie, and maybe that gives him the lift that he needs. I think he could certainly benefit from real competition there. And Robinson would probably be my number 1 player if I could bring someone in at left back. Another Premier League left back, Milos Kerkez, linked with Liverpool, Bournemouth, 21 years old. Very, very impressive every time I watch him. Awful haircut. Not that I'm one to talk, but he is very, very impressive every time I see him. Price tag sort of rumoured around the £40 million mark. I think he'd be great at Spurs. Again, arguably better than Udogie at this moment in time. Will Spurs spend 40 million on a left back when we have Udogie? I'm not so sure. So as much as I like all 3 of those players, will we get any of them? I'm not entirely sure. It's more likely to be an 18-year-old we've never heard of. But hey-ho, that's Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. A couple of midfielders, Carlos Baleba. Of course, who doesn't want Carlos Baleba? Incredibly talented, 20 years old, Brighton. It only means one thing, huge money. I think he would solve a lot of problems. He's absolutely rapid, a goal threat as well. And in that 6, room to develop. But will Spurs go out and spend crazy money? I highly doubt it. We seem to be that one club that never gets that top Brighton player. So can Spurs do something different? Who knows? I'd love him nonetheless. And another one, Tijani Reinders, the 26-year-old AC Milan midfielder. I've spoken with Melvin a lot about Reinders. He is just so great to watch on the eye. He's not the most defensive-minded, but he's pretty well balanced. But also, he's a bit of a goal threat as well. I think 7 goals and 3 assists for Milan this season. Dutch international. I think that him with Kulusevski and Sarr in a midfield, or Bentancur, what a midfield we'd have if we could bring in a player like that. I'm going to try and rattle through these quickly because I know I'm banging on. Brian Mbeumo is, I think, an obvious one for us. Right wing, 10 goals, 2 assists in the Premier League this year. Always scores against Spurs, so that's probably 2-3 goals less that we concede every single year. He's got a great shot on him, keeps improving, rapid, would give us a lot more, I think, than Brennan Johnson currently offers. And is a very different type of player, certainly would run at his defender. Again, price tag, he'd probably be, I'd imagine, around £50 million. But I'd absolutely love him at Spurs. I think he's just that right amount of age where he's ready for a step up. And I think Spurs would be a great option for him. Of course, Liverpool also linked with him with all of the sort of speculation around Mo Salah. I'm going to throw out 3 left-wing options, all probably unlikely, but players I would like nonetheless. And no, I'm not going to mention Kvaratskhelia or Nico Williams. I think as much as I'd love both of them, they're just not going to happen. Completely impossible given the way that Spurs operate unless some miracle happens. But actually, Jamie Gittins, 20-year-old at Dortmund, ex-City Academy, 9 goals, 4 assists, English, really, really impressive at Dortmund, seems to be getting better and better. long-term successor to Son is what I think we need, and he certainly would give you that. Anthony Gordon at Newcastle, I think he would be far out of our price range, but again, I'd love to see us have more English players. And I think he would offer a lot in terms of his pace and his Premier League experience. Again, that's only something that I could see happening if Newcastle are forced to sell for financial reasons. The other one I just want to throw out there, not really linked with him at all, but Mikel Oyarzabal, the 27-year-old Real Sociedad winger, of course, the man that broke English hearts in the Euros final. He's already played 41 times, scoring 13 goals for Spain. 6 goals and 2 assists for him this season. Clearly a winner, lots of experience playing in Europe's top competitions. Just bringing in someone with that bit of caliber, I think we would massively benefit from. And just finally, I'm going to throw in a striker shout, Liam Delap. Absolutely bullied us when we played Ipswich. Young, 21, big presence, good on the ball, and gives us something slightly different to Solanke in terms of the way that he attacks defenders. It's slightly different. Again, fits the quota. Probably wouldn't cost a huge amount of money, but someone that I think could definitely compete with Dom Solanke. Now, of course, just to summarise, I think Spurs do need proven starters. We need players to actually improve on our starting 11, not just provide competition. That is the thing that Spurs need to do to take us to the next level. Will we do it? Well, we've got Daniel Levy as chairman, so you never know. But hopefully we will have an active January. As I say, I'd imagine 2 players probably come in. Will we get any of the players that I've mentioned? Probably not, because it's Spurs. But here's to hoping anyway. But either way, that's the roundup.
Josh, thank you so much. I said comprehensive. Wow, what an update! What a array of players that you've mentioned there. We've all got one question each for you. In terms of numbers, Ange Postecoglou will obviously want to strengthen his squad in the January window. Realistically, Josh, we know how difficult January can be. How many players do you think we will bring in? How many players do you think Ange Postecoglou will want in this window?
I think there'll probably be an element of not wanting to spoil the apple cart, certainly at this moment of time. And I'm sure that, like anything, bringing good players in can unsettle certain players. But actually, I think that's what we need at this moment in time. We desperately need leaders. We need people who know how to play progressive football. So, some of the players I've mentioned, certainly the Bournemouth lads and Hatate, know how to play that type of football. And I think that's massively important. We need players who can hit the ground running. But also, I think really we need players who are going to give, for want of a better term, a kick up the arse to some of the players in this squad who haven't been pulling their weight. There are far too many passengers at the start of this season, and we're relying on players to step up. Of course, Archie Gray and Lucas Bergwall kind of change things slightly because they may decide they don't need a midfielder. That would be the Spurs thing to do. We don't need a midfielder because we've got players fit again, meaning that Gray and Bergwall give us enough cover. I still think Spurs are going to want to bring in 1 or 2 players, do similar to what we did in January last year. Of course, everyone, I think, was taken by surprise with how quickly we acted. And I would like to see us act quickly again. But to really put a number on it, we're just guessing at this point, because with Spurs, you simply don't know.
Josh, the last 2 January transfer windows, we bought, famously Kulusevski, Bentancur, Dragozin, who are impactful signings. Do you think Postecoglou will have a list, and if we cannot get these targets, he will say, "I'll just play the players we have and bin it off for the summer"?
Well, I think the thing with Spurs, and this is the cycle we have to break out of, we've got one of 2 problems. One, this reluctance to end or break our wage structure, which is always going to hold us back because you immediately rule out the top tier of players. But also, I think there's an element of we do need impactful players. I think you're right. And I would expect us to do sort of similar to last year. But I think Hatate is one that I I really do like, and I think a lot of fans here are talking about this as well now in the comments, liking the idea of someone that can come in and make an immediate impact. I think he will have a list of players, but the thing that we have to get out of the habit of doing is getting third, fourth choice all the bloody time. We need to be a club that has our targets in mind and goes and gets them. And I think we're starting to do that. But we need to continue to do that, especially in January. I don't want to hear the excuses of, it's tough to get players. We've got more than enough money to strengthen this squad in January. But whether we do it or not, it remains to be seen. We all know the excuses that the club will come out with if we don't. But just with where we're at, competing on all four fronts still, we desperately need reinforcements. We cannot allow what has happened to us in the first half of the season to repeat itself, and for Ange Postecoglou to be talking about having to rely on the 18-year-olds to step up because we cannot play anyone else.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Josh. Really, really good and comprehensive. Of all those names you said, and there were many, the one that interests me the most actually was Omar Mamouche. I've heard him mentioned before. I've seen him, just clips on YouTube, the whole thing. But I mean, how likely do you think they're going to go for somebody like that? I mean, his numbers are very, very good, and from what I know of him, he would fit the system. Is it just paper talk, do you think? Is that one more likely than not, if you can even say that?
Well, there's been loads of reports about Spurs sending scouts to watch him, not just this season, but last season as well. I think the big thing with Omar Mamouche is the secret is out there now. He is a player like Victor Gyökeres last season. Now everybody knows who they are, and everyone sees the quality and wants a piece of it. One of my best mates is Egyptian, and is Egypt mad, and the stuff he comes out with and says about Omar Mamouche, when he's that excited, and I don't think Egypt fans have a huge amount to be excited about all the time, that says something. I think, of course, there's that kind of natural feeling that we have that players that play in the Bundesliga should, in theory, suit the Premier League a little bit better than players perhaps from La Liga or other places, because it's a more physical league. Look, he's got all the qualities that Spurs need. He's quick, he's two-footed. In many ways, he reminds me of Son. He's been playing more of a striker role this year, but I certainly think he could do a job out on the left as well. The issue is the competition. As I say, the secret's out there. And when you're producing the numbers like that, 18 goals and 12 assists in just 23 appearances in the Bundesliga and Europa League, I mean, that's just absolutely outrageous numbers. He's already won Player of the Month in the Bundesliga this year. So certainly, whereas Spurs had an interest previously and may still have an interest, we're now going to be competing against probably some of the biggest clubs in Europe who are looking for that top player that can take them to the next level. And certainly I look at a club like Arsenal with all the complaints that they've had about Martinelli. Of course, Gabriel Jesus somehow scoring a hat-trick tonight. Seems impossible that would happen, but there we are. Still, you're feeling that they need an attacking player. I just think that there are other clubs that may have just as much of a need as us. And the only way you're going to get a player like that is by going out there early, offering whatever wage practically that they want. And seriously, first of all, no messing around on the transfer fee. They name the price, you pay the price, and you offer wages that the player can't refuse. Because clearly what is on offer at Spurs is the opportunity to be Son's successor and spend, the next 5-10 years at the club as that, star man. But Son is still the captain. He's still there at the club. He's still vitally important. So you can't offer that to a player right now. So I just wonder if that might put a player like Mamouche off. He might want to go and be a nailed-on starter straight away. And if he feels he can do that at the Champions League club, then I think he'll probably opt for that instead. But one to watch for sure. I don't think it's entirely unrealistic. It's not in the sort of Gyökeres realm.
Josh, thanks so much for that very comprehensive transfer update. We've got to have you on again very soon to do exactly the same thing, because, of course, the transfer window now opens in less than 2 weeks' time, so it is coming round pretty quickly.